Welcome to the Table Podcast, where we discuss issues of God and culture. Brought to you by Dallas Theological Seminary.
Well, welcome to the Table Podcast, where we discuss issues of God and culture. My name is Bill Hendricks. I'm the Executive Director for Christian Leadership at the Hendricks Center at Dallas Theological Seminary. Today, we're going to talk about the nurture and care of pastors. Pastors pastor others, but then the question becomes, who pastors the pastor? And I have been looking forward to this time with my longtime friend, Andy McQuitty. Andy, I guess your first title is Pastor Emeritus of Irving Bible Church. And emeritus makes you sound like an old guy, Andy.
Yeah, it makes me sound smart and important, too. Neither of which are true.
But he is also the founder of the Kaleo Collective, which is an outreach to pastors that I want to use as kind of a model and a platform to discuss this broader issue of pastoring the pastor. So, Andy, welcome to the Table Podcast.
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be with you, my old friend.
Yes. I want to get to Cleo here in a minute, but you've been a pastor now for what, your whole career, basically, right?
I have.
How'd you get into the pastorate?
Well, that's interesting. I went off to Wheaton College back in the day with. I was going to major in biology and become a missionary surgeon. Huh. Had that in my heart, and so after my freshman year at Wheaton College, they had a summer missionary project, and I signed up, and they sent me off to South America. I was up in the mountains of Colombia, wow, in the rainforest of Colombia, and they said, you'll be working with Lee Hendrickson, who's a Wycliffe Bible translator, SIL, is their terminology in South America. And they said, you'll be basically making an airstrip on the mountain ridge there so that the Helio couriers can come in and fly in and out. This was a primitive tribe, the Quaker Indians, that we were with all summer. Oh. And it was a 13-hour hike into this thing, and they wanted to make an airstrip so they could fly supplies in. Yeah. So I was going down to help them build the airstrip, but they said, but you could do some medical work too. Machete cuts, snake bites, right, worm medicine. I could be a doctor, right?
The real deal.
And so it's interesting. The Lord used that whole summer, trying to play doctor, to call me to the ministry. Because I was with some of the Indians one day at dusk when it was time for them to go down the mountain to their village. Mm-hmm. And there was this mom and her two little children, and she was on the porch of this palm slat hut that we lived in, and she wouldn't budge. And Lee spoke to her in her language, said, "You need to go." And she says, "I cannot go. It's getting dark. And if I go after dark, the demons will eat my children."
Wow.
And Lee immediately said, you can stay here with us. You can stay tonight. And then later he told me what she had said, and was like, God just put a dagger in my heart.
Yeah. You just saw up close and personal.
Yeah.
You've looked over into that spiritual realm.
He said, I want you to be a doctor. I'm calling you to be a doctor. I'm calling you to be a doctor of souls.
A surgeon of souls.
Yeah. So I came back. I changed my major. Yeah. Went a different direction, and wound up going to seminary right here at Dallas Theological Seminary, and then pretty quickly right over to Irving Bible Church, where I was the senior pastor for 32 years.
Now, if memory serves me correctly, and I may be wrong, wasn't Chuck Swindoll at Irving Bible Church at one point?
Chuck was my predecessor there.
Wow.
Not my immediate predecessor. There were two in between Chuck.
Right.
He was in the 60s, the late 60s.
That's what I was thinking.
At IBC.
Yeah.
And I came in 1987. Okay. So I came about 20 years after Chuck.
Gotcha. But there were still echoes, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and Chuck has been very gracious with me over the years, as just following the progress at his old pastorate at Irving.
Yeah. And you really helped that church grow significantly.
Well, we started with 100 people in a little old building on 4 acres down in Old Irving, and when I left, we had $12 million budget, 70 full-time staff members, relocated to a $50 million campus up in Las Colinas.
Yeah,
and I don't know how that happened. I just know that God did it.
I was going to say, apart from the grace of God,
it was all. Truly, I can't explain it. I mean, but it's what God did, and it was quite a journey for me, pastorally speaking, because I feel like though I've only ever pastored one church as a senior pastor, and that's Irving Bible Church. I think in my tenure there, I pastored 5 different churches.
Yeah, I'll bet.
The church I went to, and then and then all these increments right up until the one that I left was about 5 iterations after the first one. So it's been a journey, and
and in there, your health went bad at one point, right?
Yeah, back in 2009. I went in for a colonoscopy, and my doctor called me up, and he said, look, I just gotten off the phone with the golf course. I'd set up a tee time to play golf, and I hung up, and then my doctor called. He said, hey, bad news about the colonoscopy. He says, you got cancer in there real bad. Ooh. Get in here ASAP. We got to take care of this. Turned out to be stage 4 colon cancer.
Wow.
It gave me an 8% chance of survival.
Right.
And but we jumped in, and 2 major surgeries and 18 months of gnarly chemotherapy, and all the while still at IBC in the pulpit, and carrying through. The whole church knew I've took them on this journey with me,
right?
And they prayed me through it. And in 2012, they declared me in complete remission, and I have been there ever since. Wow. I feel like God healed me.
Absolutely.
And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. And when they did declare me in remission, I've immediately felt like an obligation to the Lord.
You've left me here to do something.
Who brought me through this, and so I took a 3-month sabbatical, and I wrote a book about the
ordeal,
the whole deal, and basically that was my offering of gratitude and thanks to the Lord, because the book consists basically of 10 questions that I wrestled with as a Christian.
Wow. When
I got cancer, all the way from the first chapters, why me? And just working through, it's part apologetics, it's part theology, it's a lot devotional, and that book continues to fly off all over the world because there's so many people that wrestle with cancer.
Well, we almost ought to do another podcast at some point on that topic because you're right. So many people deal with cancer, and it doesn't always come out well, and it is just a whole nest of issues there. But I wanted you to sort of tell that story so that our listeners really understand. We're going to talk about pastoring the pastors, but that this is a guy who, like, he's been there, like you've seen the movie and all the different scenes and iterations of what happens in that movie.
Yeah. It's been a rich experience and not always easy, as you say. And I would dare say that no pastor is ever always easy, if at all. But that it is in the grind, and sometimes the suffering, sometimes the pain, sometimes the COVID-19 lockdowns, that pastors and their congregations find something special about the Holy Spirit and God's purpose for them, both as pastor and congregation in this cultural moment. Right. So, I have learned to take it one day at a time as a pastor. And to start out with, just a plea to God, Lord, let me have listening ears to what you would speak to me, how you would guide me, and resource me for going in the directions and doing the ministry that you've called me to do. You just make that prayer every day. You have long-term plans, but you keep them short accounts.
Yeah.
Because they can change.
You don't know.
And
What's going to happen?
Yeah, like my tea time that day. I didn't keep my tea time.
That suddenly became
changed.
very minor.
It did, but this is life, and and really, I've come to find great joy in it because it's only in those gnarly, chaotic, churning times of uncertainty that you can truly experience the full breadth of God's grace and love.
Yeah.
And
when you got nowhere else to turn, He shows up.
You really learn.
Yeah.
That you are weak. I am weak. These are the three things that I learned. I am weak. God is strong. Love is precious.
There you go.
So
Praise God.
And it's how it's always been. It just took me a while to get there.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that the pastorate is a difficult job. It's challenging, and it has its challenges. But I think part of what led you to get Kaleo going was the fact that the pastorate, it seems like it's become even much harder in the last few years, just recently.
Well, it has. My goodness. I think, having several friends in other fields that require leadership. I've got friends that are CEOs of
companies and
Fortune 5 companies. I've got a 2-star Air Force general in my Bible study group. I've got a judge in my group, and he leads courts.
Right.
Whole courts, and these are people in the worlds of business, military. Corporations, law,
the professions. Right.
I've got friends that are in the academy, and they're leaders, and I'm a leader as a pastor of a church, but I've always noticed the difference that being a pastor and a ministry leader is from any other kind of leadership, and I think it all boils down to this. Our leadership requires of us to persuade people to follow because we don't have, we've got, carrots and sticks as the tools of leadership.
Yeah.
Pastors don't have any sticks.
Yeah.
I mean, my 2-star Air Force general friend has a bunch of big sticks.
Yeah, right.
My business corporate leaders, they can persuade with money or the threat of being terminated. And but in the ministry, I mean you
lean on somebody, they may just walk.
That's right, and it really so it's a mix of wise human interactions and solid leadership principles that I think go back and forth between the church and the corporate world, military world. But I mean, leadership principles are the same. Yeah. But you just have a different perspective and I think a harder challenge as a pastor. And so that's how it's always been, even what we might have termed the good old days back, before we entered into this country, into the roiling, social upheavals of the 60s and sexuality and with the genders and with the racial issues, and then all the stuff lately with wokeism and grooming and I mean, it just it's amazing to me how rapidly these kinds of challenges have snowballed. Yeah. And pastors, I mean, we're sitting out there in our churches trying to lead our people in this culture that's just coming down on us like a flood. And people asking, what do we do? What do we believe? What is right? Should we do this? Should we do that? Who do we vote for? I mean, the politics going on. 2020, 2022. Oh my goodness, we're coming up to 2024, and it's another presidential election year. And
you get it from both sides or all sides.
You do.
You try to speak biblically and pastorally into any issue, and so you say some things. And one person comes up and says, "Pastor, there you go. You're going, off on, craziness." And then somebody else comes up and goes, "Pastor, I hand it to you that you tried to say something, but man, you just fell far short of what you needed to say. Yeah. You needed to be much, much more challenging.
This is the other major difference between pastoral leadership and being a general in the Air Force or being a CEO, is that, as a pastor, everybody in your congregation feels like, they're qualified to speak to preach that sermon or to take that position just as much as you are. And when you deviate from their idea about it, they feel free to tell you about it.
You're the worst pastor in the world.
It's like, everybody. I used to speak at a convention of coaches in Texas. I love coaches, football coaches especially. And I'd get with these guys and I'd say, I really understand what you guys go through. You're down there on the sidelines in a tight high school football game, which in Texas is like professional teams in some places.
Yeah, the competition.
And you make a call. What do we do? It's 4th and 1, and we're behind by 3, and we're on the 20-yard line. Do we go or do we? And you make a call. Problem is, everybody in the stands think they know what you should do. And they think they're just as better coach, and I said that's what it's like for me sometimes preaching. And I'm looking out, and everybody out there, feels just the same way. So I understand you, and but it's always been difficult. But I do think, Bill, man, I think through the pandemic and in the aftermath of it.
Yeah, I think I saw a statistic.
Oh my gosh!
That you gave. It was 1,500 pastors were leaving the pastorate.
Yeah.
Was it
so
per month or something?
Yeah. At the height of the pandemic, we were losing up to 1,500 pastors a month in this country.
Yeah.
Their churches were locked down. And this is mostly pastors out in the hinterlands. They're not in metropolitan areas where they have a lot of peer communities or pastors or resources or whatever. And when they got locked down, they had no people coming to church. They had therefore no money flowing in.
Right.
Therefore, they had no encouragement, and they were just withering on the vine. We were losing 1,500 a month.
Wow.
I know in Canada, 600 churches shut their doors permanently.
Never opened
again. I don't know how many closed in America, but that's the stat. Here I am sitting in my little retirement, I handed off IBC to Barry not a year before the lockdowns came.
Wow.
And I felt really guilty. I felt really kind of relieved. I'm glad I'm not in that hot seat right now, leading through with masks and in person and distancing and all the stuff they had to go through.
You felt like a president that's served his term, and now he goes into that retirement, with the Secret Service and taken care of.
Yeah.
And the year after he leaves, World War III breaks out for the next guy.
Yeah. And I feel so. You feel guilty.
Yeah.
That you're not in the fray. But you also feel a little relieved it's not me.
Right.
But all that God used to kind of work on me, it broke my heart, and it was like the Lord was saying to me, "Look, I want you to help. You can do something here." And
so tell us where did that vision for Kaleo come from?
Yeah, well, it basically. You started it, Bill. I can't remember exactly when it was. It was a couple of years before the pandemic. But I remember you reached out to me and a couple of our pastor friends here in the DFW area and asked us to come up to the Leadership Center and just in your boardroom up there. I remember you just threw out to us, "Hey, look, we here at the Leadership Center, we're trying to figure out a way to support the guys in ministry that come through here and they go out, and we want to help them and bless them, and we're just interviewing pastors about your ideas about how we might go about that." And I think what you were thinking about at that time was gathering pastors in some sort of ongoing groups or cohorts.
Yeah.
And you were just asking us, what did we think about that? Would it work? How, would we be involved in all that kind of stuff? And I was intrigued by I thought it was a great question because I've always thought that pastors ought to have an ongoing, continuing education kind of morale and peer group support system, all rolled into one.
They're peers who know their world and their situation.
That's right. And so I came to the meeting very enthusiastic, and I don't even remember what I said. Y'all took notes and said, thank you very much. And so that was the last I thought about it until I'm in the middle of this pandemic shutdown, and God is just pounding on me like, I want you to do something. And I said, well, what? And my meeting with you up here at the Leadership Center came into my mind. That's what. I want you to get guys together. I want you to provide, there have been so many studies, like one of the studies that I go to is the Lilly Endowment.
Right. They do a lot in this whole area.
Back in 2010, I think in 2010 they had been at a 9-year study of what contributes to the flourishing of pastors in their calling. And they spent $10 million. They interviewed 100,000 people. It was a major thing over a 9-year period. Wow. And they released the results in 2010. And basically, and I quote this on our website in our little elevator speech video that I made, telling what Kaleo is about, is that they spent $10 million over 9 years trying to answer the question, what is it that pastors can do that will help them flourish in their ministry? And they came up with this: be in an ongoing peer group for the purposes of support, encouragement, and learning. It's like, and not only did they discover that those pastors that were involved in ongoing relationships with their peers contributed to the flourishing of their pastorate, it contributed to the growth of their church.
Sure, which makes sense.
It does. And they studied the churches of those who were engaged in these peer groups and found that there's a direct one-to-one correlation. You got a pastor who's receiving regular, ongoing support, encouragement, and leadership training in a community of his peers, and that church is also going to be growing. And it just hit me. Okay, this is it. Well, it
reminds me of what Tom Nelson says. Families don't thrive unless their church is thriving, but churches don't thrive unless their pastor's thriving.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of dominoes here that are involved.
Well, one of the things, interesting that you quote Tommy on that, because I've heard him say that, and he's so right. And when I retired in 2019 from being senior pastor at IBC, I had been, kind of kicking the tires of possibly getting into a kind of a pastoral consulting kind of ministry and so forth. And I spent a lot of time looking at becoming like a church consultant. I'd come in. I've got a good friend, Reggie McNeil, who came in and consulted with us at IBC over a couple of times over the years. And I liked Reggie. I liked his style, I liked what he did for us. And I thought, yeah, I could see myself doing that. And then I began to realize that what Tommy said is so true. And that is, hey, the church, you can go as a consultant to help a church thrive. But if you really want to help it at the grassroots, you got to help that pastor.
Yeah.
Because if you get the pastor, the church is going to come along. So,
and helping that pastor is not just giving him a bunch of advice and technical, know-how.
Yeah.
That's always beneficial, but you mentioned earlier, you're really talking about his soul.
Yeah.
What's going on inside of him.
Yeah. I brought an article here that I stuck in my file a couple of years ago. It's Tish Harrison Warren, great writer, and this is New York Times. She's talking about why pastors are burning out. And this article is 2022.
Yeah, fairly recent.
But she quotes the Barna study that everybody quotes that says that that was taken in 2022. They did a huge survey of pastors in America and found that 42% of pastors are thinking seriously about quitting right now.
Wow.
This is a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's pretty serious. And then Tish comments on that in just a couple of sentences that I want to read to you that I think really capture our heart at Kaleo Collective for what guys are going through and how we want to help them. She says, in the Barna study, the top reported reasons for clergy burnout were the same ones that people in the population at large face. This is burnout, stress, loneliness, and political division. Yeah, I mean, CEO of Exxon right down here in Las Colinas, he's susceptible to burnout for those same reasons as a pastor. Stress, loneliness, and political divisions, and those are part of the warp and woof of a pastor's challenge and looking out at a sea of faces on Sunday morning. Man, you got divisions, you've got all the stuff that's going on in this cultural moment. But then she continues. She says, but these stressors affect pastors in a unique way. And I think she's right. Pastors bear not only their own pain, but also the weight of an entire community's grief, divisions, and anxieties. They are charged with the task of continuing to love and care for even those within their church who disagree with them vehemently and vocally. These past years required them to make decisions they were not prepared for that affected the health and spiritual formation of their community, and any decisions they made would likely mean that someone in their church could feel hurt or marginalized. Wow. This is insight into this unique difficulty of being a pastor, is that not only do you have intellectual decisions to make, financial decisions to make, program and policy decisions to make, you've got spiritual and political decisions to make.
Yeah. Everything's personal.
And it is, and
because it's a bunch of interlocking relationships.
Yeah, and I just think that the pressure of all that is just too much. There is too much demanded from pastors today than what their training and experience has prepared them for. And I'm working on a book right now with another longtime pastoral friend of mine, Dr. Larry Parsley, who was recently ensconced down in Waco at Truett Seminary as a professor of theology and pastoral theology. But he and I are writing this book together. It's called Hobo Pastor, in which we're going back through and realizing all the things that in our long ministries we came to find were essential to success that we never learned in seminary.
Yeah.
I hope the walls here at DTS don't close. But I came on campus here during accreditation hearings a few times. I don't know why they brought me back. Hey, how did we do in preparing you for the ministry? And I lowered the boom a couple of times, but here I am still. And that's not DTS's fault. It's an academic institution.
I think part of the reality of training.
Pastoral ministry is something you can't learn in a classroom.
No.
And so.
And even if we gave you the information at the time,
it wouldn't mean anything.
I memorize it, I take the test, I'm done. And then you get out there in leadership, and suddenly now what was just a footnote in class, now I need a crash course in.
Yeah, you're looking back through your class notes saying, please let somebody have said what to do.
When it's a case of when the student is ready, the teacher will show up.
That's exactly right. And the teacher often is hard experiences.
Hard yeah.
So, but the overall motivating factor for me in pulling together the Kaleo Collective is just the remembrance of a peer group of my peers that kept me going here in Dallas
That
for
walked
30
with
years.
you for 30 years.
I think it was my experience with my guys, I called them. And you know most, I've said some of their names before we started this,
Yeah.
prominent pastors in Dallas and Fort Worth. We used to just get together once a month, and we'd share around. Somebody would put the food on. We'd go all in, close the doors. What happened behind closed doors with all those senior pastors stayed behind closed doors.
That's key.
And we dealt with everything in there. We dealt with like moral failures of staff members. We dealt with failed capital campaigns. We dealt with church splits. We dealt with I could go on and on. And we kept
people's anxiety, their depression, their
very
grief,
transparent,
their trauma that they remember, all that stuff.
And it was once a month. And it was just senior pastors. We get together. That was I could have saved Lily $10 million. They would have just came to me and said, well, what helps you? It's my guys, And so when we came through the pandemic and the Lord's tapping on my shoulder saying, look, I want you to do something about this. And I'm remembering that day up at the Leadership Center with you talking about getting pastors together. I'm remembering my own experience in doing that. Not organized, but just us guys. And it went for 30 years.
Right.
And I thought, that's all I want to do. I want to find a way to facilitate guys getting together in peer communities where they can deal with soul care issues and leadership best practices, where they can become a band of brothers who have enduring not just relationships but friendships, that we get together and we go through, hey, what are the bent nails that are going on in your ministry? I call them bent nails.
Yeah.
When you're pounding the thing, you just can't get, like I can't get a capital campaign launched. I've got conflict on my board. I've got a staff member who's being dishonest. I've got, and we bring these up and we talk about them on a regular basis. I also, the way that we have Kaleo set up, we have a 90-minute Zoom call, and we do this via Zoom, so the guys can participate no matter where they are. And
so it's not geographically bound.
It's not. I would prefer if it was, because
you always have to meet in person.
Our group was in person.
Yeah.
But, if there's one thing that pastors in America learned during the pandemic is how to do a Zoom call. So I thought, a lot of the pastors that need this most are probably going to be out there.
Right.
And so by they're
in a small town or a remote area or
exactly. Making the Zoom call an option includes them.
Yeah.
And
they may not be part of a denomination of any sort.
Right. They may not have any support systems, but they can be part of our cohorts and benefit the whole thing. So we have a 90-minute Zoom call with what I call our cohort pastor, our Kaleo cohort pastor, who's an old guy like me. I've got some friends. And they are, I call them sages, ministry sages, successful, experienced pastors. Most of them are not full-time. Some of them are retired like me. Some of them are. And still in the ministry.
And when you say successful, I'm assuming by that you mean not so much that, they had this massive church. It's like, no, they stayed the course for 30 years in the pastorate, and they were effective in that role.
And thank you for clarifying that. That is my definition of success: is being a faithful pastor over the years, and keeping your family, keeping your own soul together, keeping your family together, and being a blessing to your church and your community. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be big, but I do think that longevity is part of my definition of success.
Yeah, sure.
Because the best things only come after a period of time. So
and because pastoring by its nature, this is right out of the scriptures. In many ways, it's like farming. It's like growing an arbor of trees. It doesn't happen overnight. It's time with people over time.
Yeah.
and time with families over time. Because you not only got to build a relationship, but that's how people grow. It takes time to grow.
That's exactly right. That's one of the things that breaks my heart about the fallout from the lockdowns in driving a lot of people out of the ministry because they just lacked what they needed to sustain in there, and thereby killing their longevity.
Is like the elephant in the room? I guess I'd say isolation or loneliness. Is that kind of the
I think
of it?
I think those are the I think the isolation is the loneliness.
Somebody's trying to do it on their own,
but being alone in that situation, but also I think sometimes feeling inadequate. In the Barna study, they asked about 12 different questions,
right?
About what is it that is stressing you in the ministry, and the things that rose to the surface were loneliness and stress, but also number 4, I think, was a feeling that our church is not doing well and I can't fix it. In other words, I feel like I don't have the resources to turn this thing around. And in other words, I need help. I need some leadership coaching. I need some shared experiences from others who have faced similar challenges. And what did you do, and how did you manage that? I think the loneliness is kind of the hotbed of a lot of these self-doubt questions that pastors are asking. They're going, I wonder if other guys feel as blue as I do on Monday after you preach your heart out on Sunday. I wonder if other guys feel like their church is stuck and that they're not going to ever be able to get it unstuck. I wonder how other guys handle specific issues like conflict with your leadership. I wonder how they have to wonder all these questions alone. Where what we're trying to do in Kaleo is say, hey, we're coming into a group here where we're putting all our stuff on the table, like both our and what I've learned, in my cohort that I've been leading, is that this thing just catches fire because, I have 9 guys in my cohort right now, and I meet with them in a personal Zoom every month for 30 minutes, and then once all together. But in those personal 30-minute Zooms, I'm getting in the weeds with them. Okay, what questions do you want to ask me? I say right off the bat, and man, they come up with, how do I do that? I got a problem here. This thing's killing me over here. And I'll work through it with them then as much as I can, but then we'll bring it to the group in the big thing, and it never fails. I just had that,
I was going to say, I bet there's a lot
we just went through that.
Oh, you too, huh?
And so it's like, that's
I'm not the only one.
That C.S. Lewis said, this is why we read, so that we know that, it happened to them too. Yeah. I mean, it happens to our brothers in the ministry too. And they become now
peer mentors.
Yeah. And we're throwing out book. Okay, read this book. Call this person. This fundraising.
Resource. Right.
Do this. We've had a couple of occasions where we had, an elder in one guy's church had been basically put on suspension because he had made sexually suggestive statements to the secretary at the church.
Right.
And the other elders had just put him on suspension. And this young pastor was telling us, and this is my church. What about this? And a bunch of one or two of our older guys, they stepped in and said, "Okay, look, you're in the weeds here legally. You got to back this thing up. You got to get him out. You've got to call this. You can't just let this thing try to put it under the carpet. You could lose the whole church to a lawsuit.
Too much exposure."
And so, in that way,
you got wisdom.
The experience of the group comes in, and everybody's feeling like, I got a stake in your ministry, and you have a stake in my ministry, and we're like a band of brothers in this together.
Exactly.
And that's the dynamic that I had for 30 years with my guys here. It's the dynamic we want to create in the collective.
It's that feeling of, wow, these guys are for me.
Yeah.
Like they want to help me and see me succeed.
Yeah, yeah. And that is the chief challenge that we have in getting guys to come into the groups as participants, because most pastors' concept of other preachers and ministers getting together in a group is your average local ministerial association.
Right.
You smiled as soon as I said that. Everybody knows the ministerial association that meets every month. Is you get a bunch of the preachers in the room, and it's like everybody's posing and posturing.
Thing.
It's competitive,
right.
And it's gamesmanship. It's who's got the biggest church, who's
got the political power, right.
and nobody that I know wants that anymore.
No.
And so I'm just saying to everybody, Kaleo is the opposite of that. We're not interested in getting guys in groups so that they can be competing with each other, boost their self-esteem by comparing themselves to others, or lose their self-esteem by comparing them. Right. That's not what this is about at all. We are here to love each other and to help each other and to pray for each other and to hold each other's hands up. And
I would assume that one of your biggest recruiting tools, if you will, are the pastors that are in the groups, and then a buddy of theirs is, hey, I got to get together.
Yeah.
And they spill their guts, and the person says, well, man, you should come check my group out.
That I believe is going to be the primary recruiting methodology.
Yeah.
Once we get this thing to a tipping point where we're big enough to have that kind of clout. Right now, I'm relying much on Jeremiah's exhortation, do not despise the day of small things.
There you go.
We're very small.
Do not despise small beginnings.
And, my main job in these days is I'm trying my best to recruit cohort pastors, older, experienced guys who will basically say, hey, look, and I'm hiring them as independent contractors to work with me. I'm paying them to do this.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that's an excellent avenue for people they've kind of been faithful and they've had a pretty decent run, and they're not quite ready to just go play golf all day. They're like, I want to do something. Well, here's something you could do,
and they have so much to offer.
So much.
All those years of experience, much of it in the crucible. They have so much wisdom to give, and so I'm basically just recruiting very personally these cohort pastors, and then it's their responsibility
to go find
to go and recruit guys to participate in their cohorts. And this process is all on our website and so forth. But I think that. Okay, let me give you my two biggest problems in recruiting cohort pastors and cohort pastor participants into the group. My biggest problems with my cohort pastors is many of them are retired. Not all of them are. And the ones that are not retired that I'm still approaching, because I know they could do so much good for these younger pastors, I don't have time. And I understand that. If somebody...
Yeah, I'd come to you.
If younger me had approached me back when I was full in the saddle at IBC, I wouldn't even have considered it.
I can't handle what I got on my plate.
Exactly. But what I come back to them with, it hasn't been successful rebuttal yet, is that, you could be a cohort pastor. Basically, if you have 10 guys in your groups, it's only about 9 hours a month, and you get paid for it.
Yeah, but the impact,
and you do some good.
The impact.
So it's not that much time. And by the way, I don't care how many cohorts a guy wants to lead.
Right.
You can do that. But if you just do one, it's not that much. So for all of you sages out there I want to put a guilt trip on you. You got a bunch of young people out here dying on the vine. They need your help.
Yeah. They do.
But then to the participants, it's at first it was a real hard sell for me to get anybody to join my cohort. And again, it was the time issue. They thought, I don't have time for something else.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, they feel more put upon than even older guys.
Yeah.
In the churches. But I think the other resistance from pastors out there that are laboring is they just don't want to get into that old ministerial association thing, and especially if they don't already have a personal relationship with you.
Yeah.
Like of my guys, the majority of my guys, I already knew them, had a relationship with them, and they said, I'd love to be part of that. But there are a couple that didn't know me before, and man, it took me a long time. And I think it's just because they're a little skittish about committing to some sort of an ongoing peer group that they're not sure they're going to like it or enjoy. So I'll just say this: you can get out of this real quick. I mean, give us a month's notice, and you're out.
Yeah.
We don't want you to,
right?
But
you're not trying to lock anybody in.
It's not the whole rest of your life. And for those who are interested in kicking the tires a little bit before you commit, I have guests in my Zoom cohort all the time, and we'd love to have you come in for a guest. Call up one of our cohort pastors, talk with us personally, get to know us, whatever. I do think that once this thing gets some wheels to it, and we get more cohort pastors populating their cohorts and having great influence and success, I think we're going to get to a point where, as you said before, word of mouth. That's what's going to do it. But we're in the trenches right now.
Yeah. Well, our time's gone, Andy. This has just been so rich, and I guess I just want to encourage our listeners, particularly pastoral leaders. You said, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I have time for that. It's like saying, I don't know if I got time to sleep. I mean, I think it's that crucial to their literal health and their soul's health. And the image that comes to my mind, and we'll finish with this, is just, it's like mountain climbing, and I'm talking like in the Alps or the Himalayas or something. You go mountain climbing, you always go with a group of people, and they're all tied to each other because it's treacherous up there. And if somebody slips and falls, they've got somebody to belay them and pull them back, and But man, if you're trying to do that on your own, you could fall, and you could fall thousands of feet to your death, and nobody'd even hear you.
Yeah, yeah.
And to me, it's that serious.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm so thankful for the work you're doing, and I certainly endorse it and encourage it.
I appreciate
encourage pastors to check out the Kaleo Collective. Thank you for being with us today on the table.
Thank you for having me, Bill. If the guys or gals want to go to the website, it's kaleocollective.org.
.org, okay.
And it's Kaleo,
K-A-L-E-O.
with a K.
Right.
Right. As all theological people
well, I was assuming the pastors knew how to spell it.
You're right. But I don't make any assumptions anymore.
Greek.
That's right. If they did. So thank you. Thank you, Bill, for having me.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. And I want to thank you for joining us today on the Table Podcast. You can subscribe to the Table on your favorite subscription service, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Table. I'm Bill Hendricks. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Table Podcast. Dallas Theological Seminary. Teach truth, love well.